Campbell Burns from Vacations. Welcome to Australian Musician.
Hey, thank you for having me.
So, whereabouts have you been holed up in isolation? How have you been coping? What have you been up to?
So I'm from Newcastle, New South Wales. I've been holed up in my house for a lot of the time, but I don't know. I feel like I haven't been affected by it as most people would have because I work from home. I'm actually in my little studio now, which, I'm very grateful to have that. And I just work full time on music. So
Yeah.
it's been pretty nice. I mean, I miss touring. I miss playing shows, and I even miss the in-between moments, just waiting around to get on stage, or just having a meal somewhere, or taking photos, or just being goofy with my friends, or getting up
Sure.
to mischief. But it's been nice, just being able to work on music for myself and for other projects, and just writing and just playing. And I don't know. This year's definitely taken a different avenue than I would have liked. I think for a lot of people, I can they can say that, but
Yeah.
yeah. It's been cozy. I'll say, like my experience at least in isolation. I mean, I'm just doing what I love and what I'm passionate about, so I can't really complain.
Yeah. When you formed the band Vacations, what was the original vision for the band? What were the goals?
Oh God, that's a good question. I really wanted to play at the Enmore Theatre. That's actually this is the first thing that comes to my mind. That's always been a goal of mine. I don't know though. I just sort of did things like day by day. I don't know if I was really like I had this grandiose vision, like, oh, I'm gonna be here in, like, 5 years, 10 years time. I think as I get older, I actually get more of a vision of where I would like to be. But I think when I started, I was just kind of making music in my bedroom or whatever room was available to me, and just sort of seeing where that would take me. I don't think there was much thought or like planning involved. It just sort of one thing after the other.
Yeah. So, have you played the Enmore?
No, no, I haven't, but I would really like to. I used to go to shows there all the time when I was like 15, 16. I would get the train and then get the train back at like 1 or 2 in the morning and get home at like 5 o'clock and just walk home from the train station. It was very silly, but I don't know. I don't know. I was like really just like passionate about going to shows, and I'd always see so many. Like I saw My Bloody Valentine, Godspeed You Black Emperor, like a lot of like shoegazy, washed out guitar bands there, which I think were pretty influential on me, like growing up. So I don't know, being on that stage is like going back to my younger self, like starting out in band, and like when I was starting to kind of find my influences, I think that was like a really big goal. Like, oh, I want to play on that stage. Like, I want to do that. Like, yeah.
Forever in Bloom is the second album coming out on September 18. What kind of
Hmm.
things did you learn or mental notes taken making changes, your debut album that you took into the new album?
Um, definitely collaboration and just being open to just a more open process, I guess, in whole, and like at every stage as well, from songwriting to pre-production to the actual production and recording, just having more people involved and kind of having more thoughts and ideas, more people in the room when you're actually making music as well. So you have like this level of excitement and energy that's kind of bouncing around the room. I think is really important, and I'm leaning more towards that style of making music nowadays as well. I think there's just a certain feeling when you're like creating something in a room with people, and there's just all like everyone's getting like really into it, and it just feels like it's like a nice shared experience rather than sort of just in your room in your little like cave just chipping away at a song. I think there's value in both processes. I don't think one is better than the other, but I would say in contrast to the first album, that was definitely the biggest difference, I guess, with that as well, is that I wasn't recording it in a tiny shoebox of a room. It was at a professional studio, with like a big SSL desk and like heaps of wonderful preamps and compressors and mics and just everything. So,
Yeah, there seems to be another dimension to your sound with this album, and also in the press release, you were saying you were playing around with time signatures. There seems to be a real hunger to grow and develop your sound rather than just release a new bunch of songs. Would that be true?
Yeah, absolutely. I find I can't really write the same thing over and over again. I just get really bored by that, and I just don't think you really grow as a person first and then a musician if you're just doing the same thing over and over again. I feel like for me personally, it just loses its appeal quite quickly. Like, I just think you should always be trying to push yourself and trying new ideas and just see where that takes you. I think that's a lot more fulfilling and enriching, like for yourself and like for your practice.
Yeah. Oscar Dawson was the producer. What did he bring to the project?
Expertise that we did not have. No, it sort of felt like having a fifth member in the band. He gelled in really well with us and was just able to. I kind of feel like he was a coach. Like he would just be able to sort of coach our performances and just offer like ideas and suggestions. And he's produced so many albums in the past, and he's a bit older than us. And I don't know, it's just this level of insight that we don't have yet. And I think I think it was really valuable. I think it was really good being able to work with him.
Album begins with a 1 minute 15-second instrumental. Where did that idea come from?
I think that was a spur of the moment idea in the studio because we were talking. I think again, this is that whole idea of collaboration and just being in the studio, working as a team. Because I remember we did have the first song of the album, but we were all saying that we wanted to kind of have this intro to sort of, kick off the album and make it really grandiose, rather than just going immediately into a song. Kind of set up like the theme and the mood and the vibe and really just get people into it. It's like, oh, this is like going to be really big. And I think it was in the second week of recording. I do remember it was in the tail end because it was one of the last things that was done. And we just discussed that idea of Oscar, and he was just like, let me see what I can do. And he whipped that up really quickly. And then we just threw in some thoughts and suggestions, and then we kind of tailored it a little bit more to how we wanted it. And it turned into that.
Yeah, I believe the track Peaches came out of using a Roland Juno plugin and maybe set the tone for some other songs. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, it did. I've been getting into synthesizers. I want to understand how that works and like the whole idea of sound design and production, because I don't think that's something I necessarily considered that much in the past. Whereas now it's something I value quite deeply. And I don't know, I listened to a bunch of bands and I was like, oh, what do they use? And, I've seen things like Yamaha DX7 and the Roller Juno 60 and the 106. And there's certain sounds associated with those kinds of like 80s synthesizers that I love. And they kind of, as well, it complements the guitar tone in a sense as well, because those sort of synthesizers and that whole sound is quite chorused or like slightly detuned. It doesn't sound quite right, and I'm quite drawn to sounds like that are sort of a little bit broken or textured, and they have a lot of character, kind of speak to me, I guess, in a way. Also, as well, like piano was my first instrument, so it was sort of a way of going back to that where I started. Because when I played piano, I would have been like 10 in the school band. I didn't realize until years later, like when I thought back on it, that I was given the tuba part. So I would just be sitting there playing one note, like dun, 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 like for like 3 minutes, and then I think I slowly kind of brought in chords. I don't know. I remember I played it for a couple of years, but I fell out of it and went to guitar. So I think years and years later, I've played guitar for so long now, I'm at a skill level where I feel quite comfortable and quite confident with my playing. And I sort of almost at the point now I kind of feel like I have my own like technique and style. And it's sort of like, well, how can I branch out and do that on, a synth or a piano or any other kind of instrument? So I think like those synthesizers like the Roland Juno are just really complementary to my kind of guitar tone and style and songwriting. And those synths cost like $3,000. Like I can't afford that, I would love to, but luckily I found an alternative, which was that Roland plugin, which has a really weird name. It's like Tal-U-XO or something. It's like $60, but it's one of the most like faithful recreations of that synth. And I've seen heaps of comments and reviews for it that people can't tell the difference in a blind test. Like they sound almost identical. I'm sure there's some purist that will call me out and say like, oh, but it's not, it hasn't got the transformers or the guitar or whatever. Like, I think it sounds great. And it was fun just trying to write songs that didn't start with a guitar, that started on a synth. I will just so often pick up a guitar and play the exact same like major seventh chord. And it's like, I've done that so many times. Like what if I just played it? What would happen if I played it on like a synth? And then that's how you get songs like, Peaches or Something Here, more of those like synthy kind of dance numbers. Yeah.
Speaking of dance numbers, Panache is the current single, and you brought in some other people to work on that.
Yeah.
Tell me about that song and the people involved.
That song was one of the first demos that existed for the album. I don't know. It's like you write a song and you kind of keep working on it, but you get to a point where it's like, you don't really like it anymore. You're kind of like, I want to step away from this and do something else, because it's like the gain that you might be making on that track is quite minimal compared to something else. And it's just, I don't know. So, it sat there for like a year, and I remember it was a favorite of Jake, our bass player. He really, really liked the track, and he was like, oh, I'm sure we could like slip this into the album. Like, maybe there's a way we could make it work. And I was like, look, I will revisit it. I'll see what I can do. And I went back to that track, and I just took a different approach to it. I actually picked up my bass, and I played the chord progression like on the bass, and just kept it very how would I describe that? I was listening to a lot of Men I Trust at the time, and I was sort of like, one of my favorite bass players is Carol Kay as well. And like, they're kind of in the same realm where it's like P bass, flat wound strings, you use a pick, it's quite boppy, and you're not just playing the root note, you're not just sort of staying in that position, it's actually quite melodic and quite involved. And I really like bass lines like that. And I think they're really underrated. I don't think they get enough attention. And I thought that my friends Creative Face is like hip hop duo from Newcastle, they would do really well on that. And I threw it to the table. I was like, I kind of want to have Sarah from Sunscreen to do the second verse, and I want to have Crater on the outro. I think they would do great. This is going to be such a wild card track, but it's going to be, I feel really confident about it, and I'm grateful that everybody was on board for it, because it is such the idea that is so different that it could have just got shot down completely and it could have turned into something else. But I'm glad it turned into what it did. Yeah, God, I could rant all day about it. I think that answers your question.
Yeah. No, the result's great. It's a great track.
Thank you.
Tell me about the guitars that you used in the recording.
So I use I think it's a 1995 or a 1996. It's a 90s Japanese Stratocaster that has lace sensor pickups. Fun fact, I used to hate Stratocasters. I thought they were I don't know why. It's like when I started playing guitar, I just didn't. It's like that was the most popular guitar, so I just didn't like it. So it's kind of funny to me over the years. As I've progressed, I've just gone for the Strat. I think it's just the most versatile sounding guitar, and it's just great for cleans. It's so fun to play. I'll get the exact model after the interview or something, and like email that through if I can. But yeah, I used the 90s MIJ Stratocaster, and then I also used a Guiatone Mosterite copy. It's this really old, gross guitar that shouldn't work. It's like there's huge chunks of wood that have been taken out of it. Like the strings are really rusty. There's scratches and marks over it everywhere. Like it's just been used and abused so much. It's like 50 years old, like 60s thing. And that was used for some of the more like darker lo-fi kind of tones because it just sat in that realm and it did great. Nate, our lead guitarist, He used the Fender Mustang. It's like one of the newer models. It's like the American Performer Mustang, which is like quite chimey. I really like Mustangs, and I would love to get one. They're quite fun guitars. But yeah, I think it was just those three guitars that
Yeah,
I've got
yeah,
all the sounds of the album, and then like for the amps as well. Like I ran a Fender Silverface reverb, and Nate would use my Roland JC40. So respectively, like if you hear anything from Nate, it's going to be through that amp with the Mustang, and then if you hear anything from me, it's going to be that Fender amp with the Strat, or maybe with the Moss Strat, which is kind of nice because I feel like it sort of sets up like a personality for each of the sounds. Like it's very like, oh, that's like Campbell's sound or that's Nate's sound, and there is like kind of a gear and like signal chain that follows those respective sounds. So it's like these two contrasting kind of personalities, which I think work quite well together.
yeah. So obviously you can't tour in the way in which you would like, but when you get the band up and running and touring again, um,
Mm.
will you have to change up your gear to play this album live?
Yeah, yeah, that's something we're in the process of doing. Because we will need to run backing tracks for a lot of the ambience, some of the backing vocals and harmonies, which are actually very important. And just like synth tones, like bass drops, like there's heaps of like textural elements to the songs that I think are very important for the album. And it's like there are a lot of songs that we could play without the use of like a backing track, like live system or whatever, but I just don't think you'd get quite the same experience.
The album Forever in Bloom is out on September 18. What are the revised plans for 2020?
Revised plans is trying to figure out how you can still play shows and connect with your audience. It's really
Yeah.
yeah, no one's ever been in a position like this. It's crazy to think about, like because you release an album and then the industry standard PR plan is to go tour for 6 months, but you can't do that. So it's like, well, how do you reach your fan base and then also gain new fans and like share that excitement and like all that hard work. It's different, but I think I guess that forces creativity as well through limitations. So I guess we'll plan some live streams and probably do some smaller. I mean, provided COVID doesn't get worse and it stays as it is, we could do some shows around Australia that are limited capacity seated. Um, I mean, I guess that would be the plan. I think we might start writing some new material soon, but I won't go too much further into that.
Yeah.
Just
All right.
doing what we can.
Yeah. All right. Well, the album's out September 18. All the best with that, and thanks for joining us.
Yeah, cool. No worries. Thank you for having me.